something that the Prime Minister has been aggressively pushing for the last couple of years now, and indeed the Law Commission of India has come out with a draft paper on this whole idea of simultaneous elections, which basically means you would have the general election and all state elections held together at one time. So the Law Commission basically says that the simultaneous polls actually were held for the first 20 years after independence. They can be restored by amending the constitution, and that the leader of a majority party can be elected as PM or CM by the entire house. That's either by the Lok Sabha or Assembly. So they've given the example of what India did soon after independence and how it can be repeated. But of course, you do remember that means changing the entire constitution. So political parties met with the Law Commission over the weekend, and interestingly, the parties that didn't happen to be the BJP and the Congress. I don't know why. We're going to try and figure that out. But the parties who supported the idea of one nation, one poll included the Samajwadi Party, which of course is a key constituent of any opposition unity against the BJP, the TRS, Telangana Rashtra Samiti, the Bodoland People's Front, the TMC, the CPI, the TDP, Aam Aadmi Party, DMK, JDS. All of them have come out strongly against this proposal in front of the Law Commission. And here in the studio with us, we have Mr. T.S. Krishnamurthy, the former Chief Election Commissioner of India. Juhi Singh of the Samajwadi Party also joins us. Mr. Krishnamurthy, what do you think of this idea of having a simultaneous poll? Do you think it can work? We are a parliamentary democracy. You have so many assemblies. You have the Lok Sabha. Can it work here?
Well, if you look at the conditions in India, particularly the frequency of elections, the violence and hatred that takes place during the elections, and the model enforcement of model code of conduct, if you take all these aspects into account, you feel it is better to have simultaneous elections. But that is not the answer to everything. It is only an administratively convenient and probably desirable from the point of view of governance of the country. But it is not going to be easy. As you know, that there is a requirement of the constitution amendment. Unless and until you have a fixed tenure for a house, it would not be possible to implement simultaneous elections. So that is a primary requirement, amendment of the constitution. If you are not amending the constitution, the only other alternative you have is to bunch the elections in 1 year, which of course also would require an amendment to the Representation of People's Act. But that may be easier done than the constitutional amendment.
But what are the other sort of obvious disadvantages you see, apart from the fact that it requires the constitution to be changed? But there has been an argument as well that in a parliamentary democracy, this may not necessarily be the most desirable route to follow. Well,
very often it is criticized because a federal spirit may not be very much encouraged by having simultaneous elections. I don't agree with that view because, first of all, in the first few years, we had simultaneous elections, and there are many countries that are simultaneous elections. Secondly, there are elections where simultaneously held different parties have been voted to power. Take example of Orissa, Tamil Nadu, Kerala. There are many instances where. So you're saying it's not necessary that the party at the center would have an advantage. You are assuming that voters will vote only for the particular party, either for the both for the center and the states. That is probably a wrong presumption, in my opinion. Well, Shekhar Gupta, I guess the argument then would be, if India could do it for 20 years when we became independent, why can't we do it now?
Because 20 years
theoretically
you had uninterrupted one party rule, so you could do it. And if another party came to power, starting with Nehru in Kerala, you just dismissed it using 356 and put together a government of your own somehow. So India has moved on a great deal from a default single party system. India is not like the American system, where a government never changes, a government never falls.
The president changes.
But you know who will be the next in line. It's like the British royalty. You know who is the 103rd in line to succeed the president. So, and the same thing happens elsewhere in the provinces also. In India, suppose you make it simultaneous once. What happens if your central government falls in 6 months? Where is the guarantee the central government will survive? Will you then continue under president's rule at the center? Think about your own recent history, more recent history. Between 96 and 2004, we had 5 elections. So, between 1989 and 91, we had 2 elections, national general elections. Would you then have held all the states again? And would you then have allowed Mr. Gujral to run a caretaker government for 4.5 years? this is a completely, I don't even know how a debate is relevant, because it makes zero sense. In fact, since 1989, central governments in India have been more unstable than state governments. So what happens? Every time a central government falls,
or even a state government.
so, but you know, every time a central government, state, you will say, I'll put it under president's rule and carry on.
That's also
right?
undemocratic in a democracy.
I know, but you know,
that's not the right way to do it.
I'm saying even if you do that, but the boot is on the other leg. So what happens every time a Gowda falls or a Gujral falls or a Vajpayee falls? Vajpayee fell the first time in 13
one
days.
Vote.
Yeah, the second time by one vote within a year.
Yeah.
So every time that happens, you will drag every state again to elections and destabilize everybody.
Lalita Kumaramanglam is here from the BJP with us.
I don't know how can it work.
So Lalita Kumaramanglam, how would it work? I mean, maybe if we had a different system of democracy, a different type of democracy, which we don't. We are very much a parliamentary democracy. How would it work in a democracy like this?
Look, it's very difficult to tell you exactly this is how we are going to make it work. But there are many factors which support the idea of simultaneous elections. In the last 70 years of India's independence, we have had perhaps 2 periods of unrest where the central government has fallen repeatedly 2-3 times over a period of 3 or 4 or maybe 5 years. Aside from that, despite Mr. Shekhar Gupta saying that they had only a one-party democracy, there was, of course, yes, I agree, the Congress was the majority party then and there were really no other parties. Today, the democracy is much more mature with many regional parties, etc., etc. Nonetheless, you need to take the problems of holding elections continuously throughout the year also into account. Are you going to put the needs and the interests of political parties first, or are you going to put the needs and the interests of the country's people first? First, the Election Commission has to hold, spends about, I think in 2014, roughly they spent about 4,000 crores and 1.1 crore personnel. So you're actually taking all these guys who should be working within the government for the benefit of people in India into election mode throughout the year. Something or the other is happening. Also, there is always the chance that the parties, actually you can see it happen in front of you, it's not a chance, it's a certainty, that the parties that are standing against each other become so vitriolic and so bitter about each other that virtually no governance is possible. This often even happens at the state. There are always risks in any constitutional
I don't think anybody disputes, ma'am, sorry, just to interrupt you there briefly, I don't think anybody disputes that having constant elections is a problem because it is...
Parties can sit down and talk to each other in a sort of...
No, sorry, I'm saying nobody disputes that we spend too much money on elections, we spend too much time campaigning, you know, one election, Karnataka's over, now we're thinking about Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, then the general election, it's a constant cycle. Having said that, while there's no disagreement on that, the issue is, as Shekhar said, what happens if the central government falls, even a state government? Would there be just president's rule, you know, for the next 5 years of that government? That would go against the very spirit of democracy.
No, I think Shekhar is exaggerating.
But it has happened,
I think Shekhar is exaggerating just to get his point across to people. The fact is that when you change the law, or you make an amendment in Parliament, or you want to amend the Constitution, I'm sure that it's not going to happen overnight. You have to sit down, talk to the Election Commission, talk to all the other parties. Are you seriously telling me that all the parties put together in this country are so immature that they would not have expected that something like this can come up, and how do we get around it?
I don't know if it's a point of maturity, but before I come to Manish, Shekhar has a quick point to make. Okay, Mr. Kumaramanglam, give me one moment. Shekhar has a response to what you're saying, and I'll come to Manish. Okay.
See, between 1996 and 2004, there were 5 general elections in India.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, did India become weaker because of that? No, definitely not. Second, are you then trying to say that once a party is elected for 5 years, nobody can disturb it? That is not how parliamentary democracy functions. It's not just because life will become boring for us journalists, but that means you will have, suppose an arrangement like Karnataka comes up. It has come up now. It can fall in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. But are you then going to say that once this arrangement comes for 5 years, you cannot dismiss it. You know, it's the first time that I'm watching the ruling party drumming up a fear of elections. The last thing a democracy should fear
is elections.
Is elections. Look at so many European countries have elections all the time, and India has had elections all the time. It has not weakened India. It has all the money stays with. But you know, and Mrs. Kumar Mangalam said that our Indian politicians, political parties, so immature that they cannot arrive at a settlement. I do believe that Indian political parties are too mature to fall for a trope like this. This is nonsensical that once you elect, then if you don't elect my guy, then I will use the presidential powers and not let this guy to be sworn in.
So Manish Tiwari, is that what the Congress
then you
thinks
might
is
as well
happening
suspend
as well?
our democracy.
Yeah, that it's one nation, one poll, one party. Manish Tiwari, is
one
that
leader.
Well, yeah, exactly, one leader.
As Indira,
yeah,
we've seen this movie.
Is that what this is looking like to you?
Nidhi, this is frankly a completely outlandish idea. It's a non sequitur, it's a non-starter. The question is not whether you can align the electoral cycle once. The question is, can you keep the electoral cycle aligned? And then somebody seems to be forgetting there is something called Keshav Nand Bharti, and Keshav Nand Bharti laid down the basic structure of the constitution. Parliamentary democracy as it stands constituted forms a part of the basic structure of the constitution. Even if parliament wants, it cannot amend and do away with parliamentary democracy in the form as it stands now, because that is what Keshav Nand Bharti sanctified in 1973. So therefore, this is just another jumla, to divert the attention of the people. One nation, one tax, one nation, one poll, sit down India, stand up India, crawl India, bend India, Khelo India. It's rhetorical, it's sloganeering, and it's nothing beyond that. And even the BJP and the Prime Minister know that.
But then Juhi is saying the Samajwadi Party, what are its reasons for supporting this? And how do you think it's going to work?
But they'll get UP tomorrow.
No, that's what I'm saying. So you're looking at UP and the term of the Adityanath Assembly.
Nidhi, as a principle it sounds excellent, and of course I agree that it has centralizing tendencies, but we also feel that the regional parties are strong enough to really hold their ground. And as for UP, yes, politically also it's interesting for us, but I agree with that there are implementation problems, there are serious issues. The BJP has started this agenda, has started this entire discussion claiming to put it in place, but although we agree with the principle, we also are there on the table for discussion as to how this is going to be implemented, what is the machinery which is going to be required. So, I mean, we are not opposing it. That's simple, and we are supporting them on principle. But again, already the report which has gone from UP has really shifted the goalpost for the UP election to 2024, as far as my information is. So, how serious is the central government is again the question.
But it's nice how you're kind of hedging your bets.
Really
we support this in principle, but we have these concerns maybe a little bit, about centralizing tendencies. I mean, it's very obvious that the SP is looking at its own sort of narrow political ends, or maybe not narrow from your perspective, but it's looking at its political ends and taking a call that way.
Dissension, a part of it, isn't that what the Congress party is trying to say?
But
people support them, it's fine.
One second, just getting a comment from Juhi Singh first, from the SP. Yes, Juhi.
Yes, Nidhi, but as a principle, you would also agree that it sounds good, and as a principle, BJP introduced it for its own end. So we would like to hear what they have on table, and there is nothing wrong. We've supported them on various governance issues. So if we have concerns, we are voicing them, and I'm sure the BJP also has concerns. But I think that it will encourage responsible alliances, pre-poll alliances. That's one thing which the Samajwadi Party does encourage, that instead of forming governments just for the sake of forming governments, it would encourage some pre-poll alliances. And yes, Indian democracy, I agree that we've had irresponsible experiences in the past, but we have moved ahead, and I think anybody who makes an alliance fall is also held accountable by the people.